In the early years of the 20th century, when the world rattled with machines and whispered with fear, the night sky over Europe felt strangely thin, as if the stars themselves were listening, waiting for someone to say something completely unexpected. On one such night, in 1916, a small lantern flickered outside a bar in Zurich. Its glass was cracked, and its glow trembled like a shy heartbeat. But inside the building, the Cabaret Voltaire, something wild and gentle and utterly impossible was beginning to bloom. A young wanderer named Milo pushed the door open. He wasn't an artist, though he carried a sketchbook he never used. He wasn't a poet, though he collected words like seashells. He wasn't a musician, though he hummed to himself when nobody was listening. Mostly, he was someone who felt the world had become too heavy, too loud, too serious, too full of broken things that nobody knew how to fix. The room he stepped into was small and smoky, filled with people who looked as though they might be inventing themselves on the spot. At a corner table sat Hugo Ball, wearing a cape that shimmered like a broken typewriter ribbon. Beside him, Emmy Henning scribbled a poem in a notebook, her handwriting slanting wildly as if trying to outrun meaning. "Welcome," Hugo said, standing up as if pulled by invisible strings. "We're building a new world here, one that laughs in the face of destruction, one that dances barefoot on all the things that claim to be serious." Milo blinked. "What kind of world is that?" Hugo grinned. "A Dada world." As if summoned by the word, the room erupted. A man began reciting a poem made entirely of invented syllables. A woman in a feathered hat banged a drum in soft, irregular beats. Someone released dozens of paper birds that fluttered around the lamps, casting shadows shaped like forgotten dreams. Emmy beckoned Milo closer and whispered, "Dada began because the world cracked. When things break, art can slip through the gaps." Milo sat down, feeling the weight in his chest ease slightly, as though nonsense were a key that fit an invisible lock inside him. Outside the cabaret, the war marched on with brutal logic, but inside, logic had been turned upside down and gently shaken until all the stiffness fell out. The artists painted with broomsticks, glued spoons onto canvases, shouted lullabies, and whispered protests disguised as jokes. They believed, fiercely, tenderly, that absurdity could heal the places that reason alone could not reach. One night, as snow spiraled outside like torn-up letters, the group gathered around a large, empty stage. Hugo stepped forward, wearing a costume that looked like a cathedral made of cardboard. "I will read," he announced, "a poem made of pure sound." Everyone leaned in. Even the snowflakes seemed to pause midair. "Gaji Beribimba." The poem rang out like a spell broken into pieces. With each strange syllable, Milo felt the world inside him shift. It was as if all the normal rules of art, of speech, of thinking, of being had been gently loosened. The poem said nothing, and yet somehow it said everything. Afterward, Milo wandered backstage, where scraps of ideas lay scattered like treasure, a box of mismatched words, a violin with no strings, a painting that insisted it was not finished and never would be. The air smelled of ink, candle wax, and a hint of rebellion. There he found Tristan Zara, folding a newspaper into tiny fragments. "What are you making?" Milo asked. "A poem," Tristan replied. Or perhaps a bird. Or perhaps a question. He held up the fragments, letting them drift through his fingers like snow. Pick one, he said. Milo chose a slip at random. It read, Why not? Tristan smiled. Exactly. As the months passed, Milo became part of the strange, beating heart of the cabaret. He learned to tear apart the newspaper of the world and rearrange it into something gentler, stranger, freer. He learned that art could be a shield and a scream, a joke and a truth. He learned that nonsense could whisper things sense was too afraid to say. But one night, a quiet night, unusually quiet, something changed. The lantern outside flickered in a different rhythm, slower, deeper, as if warning of something unseen. The artists inside gathered around Milo, who had been writing in his sketchbook for the first time in months. Emmy touched his arm. There's something we haven't told you. The room stilled. Even the shadows leaned in. Dada doesn't stay in one place, she murmured. It travels. It leaps from city to city, from artist to artist, from heart to heart. And now it's calling you somewhere else. Milo's breath caught. Where? Hugo smiled softly, his cardboard costume rustling like dry wings. That, he said, is for you to discover. And then, the lantern outside the cabaret Voltaire gave a long, trembling sigh, as though exhaling the last breath of an old world. Its flame stretched into a thin blue thread, fluttered twice, and pointed east. Milo felt the tug immediately. Not a command, not a threat, more like an invitation sent by a mischievous universe. The others saw it too. Emmy folded her hands. Tristan tilted his head, like a bird listening to an unfamiliar melody. Hugo simply nodded, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. Milo, he said softly, wars shape borders, but ideas slip through them. Dada is already moving beyond Zurich, to Berlin, Paris, New York. It's growing legs. And wings, added Emmy, tapping the side of her notebook. Milo swallowed. But why me? Because you still wonder, Tristan said, as though that explained everything. So Milo packed a small bag, one unfinished sketchbook, a pencil bitten at both ends, a button he had found on a cabaret floor, and a slip of paper that asked, Why not? He stepped outside into the snow, which fell in slow spirals, as if unsure whether to become winter or merely an idea of winter. The streets were nearly empty. A thin fog curled along the cobblestones. But as Milo walked, he noticed something strange. Every time he passed a street lamp, its light flickered into shapes, brief silhouettes of dancing chairs, laughing scissors, or words that wriggled like newborn stars. Dada is traveling with you, Emmy had said. Halfway across the Munster Bridge, Milo stopped. There, perched on the railing, was a crow with a typewriter key clenched in its beak. The bird dropped it into Milo's hand. The key read, B. Berlin, Milo whispered. The crow cawed in a tone that suggested both approval and sarcasm, then took off into the fog, heading east. Milo followed. He traveled through nights that smelled of iron and chimney smoke, through towns where posters peeled off walls like exhausted soldiers, through train stations full of faces that had forgotten how to smile. But everywhere he went, tiny glimmers followed him. Scraps of poems caught in doorways, fragments of laughter that didn't belong, drawings chalked on walls by invisible hands. One dawn, the train rattled into Berlin. The city felt raw, electric, wounded. Buildings stood half-finished or half-broken. Political posters screamed at one another across the streets. But underneath all that noise, Milo sensed something else, a thrum, a pulse, a furious spark. Dada had arrived before him. He followed the pulse to a shabby art studio with a cracked window. Inside, a group of artists crowded around a table covered in newspapers, scissors, glue pots, and half-drunk cups of bitter coffee. A thin, sharp-eyed man looked up as Milo entered. It was Richard Hilsenbeck. "You're late," Hilsenbeck said, though Milo had never met him. "Sit down. We're rewriting the world." Another artist shoved a newspaper into Milo's hands. "Cut it up," she commanded. "Cut everything. Let meaning fall apart. Let new meaning crawl out." Milo sat. He cut. He rearranged headlines until they protested. He glued verbs onto photographs until they lost their patience. He created sentences that refused to behave. Across the table, Hilsenbeck beat a drum, angrily, joyfully, as though summoning storms. "Berlin, dead as in Zurich, Dada," he growled. "No soothing nonsense here. We shout because the world is shouting." The artist erupted into rhythmic chanting. Dada is a slap. Dada is a crack in the map. Dada is the truth dressed as a joke. Milo felt the energy roar through him. This was not the gentle rebellion of Zurich. This was fire. This was art as protest, art as weapon, art as wild refusal. But later that night, when the others had gone home, Milo wandered outside alone. The sky above Berlin was glowing with a faint red haze, from factories, from anger, from a future roaring toward the city like a train that couldn't break. He sensed Dada shifting again, becoming something else, pulling him somewhere new. On the pavement, under a gas lamp, he noticed a new object waiting for him. A single torn postcard, its edges scorched. On the front was a photograph of the Eiffel Tower. On the back, in looping handwriting, a message. "When nonsense becomes dream, come find us. M." Milo recognized the signature instantly. Marcel Duchamp. He looked east, then west, then at the postcard glowing faintly in the cold Berlin night. Paris. Dada was moving again. And Milo took a deep breath, stuffed the postcard into his coat, and stepped toward the next part of the unknown. Paris smelled of wet stone and old stories when Milo arrived. Not the romantic scent from postcards, but something rougher, ink mixed with machine oil, rain soaked into ancient walls, and the faint perfume of people dreaming too loudly. The city seemed to inhale and exhale ideas. Even the street lamps flickered as though arguing with themselves. Milo stepped out of the Gare de l'Est, clutching Duchamp's postcard. A fog rolled across the streets like a curtain rising for a play. He followed the only clue he had, a small pencil sketch at the corner of the postcard, barely visible unless one tilted it toward the fading sun. A sketch of a spinning bicycle wheel. He knew where he had to go. through narrow alleys, across bridges lined with lovers and revolutionaries, up crooked staircases where every wall had been carved, scratched, painted, or accidentally kicked by an artist with too much to say. At last, he reached a small apartment full of noises that didn't belong in any apartment at all. A gentle clinking, a distant whir, a kind of metallic heartbeat. He knocked. The door opened by itself. Inside, the room was almost empty except for a stool topped with bicycles spinning slowly, mysteriously, with no wind and no hand to turn it. Milo stared. "That," said a voice behind him, "is a question disguised as an object." Milo turned. Marcel Duchamp leaned casually against the doorway to the kitchen, wearing a shirt smudged with charcoal and a smile that understood more than it admitted. "You must be the wanderer from Zurich," Duchamp said, crossing the room with the relaxed confidence of someone who had already abandoned all rules, including gravity. "Hugo wrote to me about you. Said you listen well." "I try," Milo said. I followed Dada here." "Oh, Dada isn't here," Duchamp replied. "It never stays put." He tapped the spinning wheel lightly. It accelerated, then slowed, then accelerated again, as if it had a mind. "What is it?" Milo asked. Duchamp shrugged. "A wheel, a sculpture, a joke, a revolt, a reminder that art can be anything or nothing. It's ready-made." Milo felt a subtle shift inside him, like a door opening. "Paris Dada," Duchamp said, "isn't about chaos like Berlin, nor about spiritual refusal like Zurich. Here, we ask questions so sharp they cut through reality. Questions like, why must the painting be painted? Why must meaning behave? Why must the world make sense?" He walked to a small table cluttered with objects: a comb, a wine bottle rack, a broken toy soldier missing its head. "All of these," Duchamp added, "are potential bombs, not to destroy buildings, but to destroy expectations." The studio window rattled. Someone downstairs shouted the name Picabia, followed by enthusiastic, violent laughter. "Ah," Duchamp sighed. "Francis is here. Prepare yourself." The door burst open. Francis Picabia strode in like a storm, wearing a smile. His coat was drenched, his hair wild. His eyes carried the spark of a man who considered sleep an unattractive hobby. "Milo," Picabia declared, though he had never met the boy. "Zurich sent you to us? Good. We need someone who hasn't yet grown cynical. Come, we're going to rewrite the sky tonight." Before Milo could respond, Picabia threw an arm around him and dragged him toward the street. Duchamp followed calmly, locking the door with the resigned air of someone used to being kidnapped by creative lunatics. They walked through Paris until they reached a cafe where the walls were covered in drawings resembling machines that dreamed of becoming humans, and humans that wished to become machines. The cafe was full of Dadas, speaking loudly enough to shake the sugar bowls. Art must be a weapon. No, art must be a whisper. Nonsense is the most honest language. Destroy museums. Build museums for mistakes. Picabia leapt onto a table. "This city," he announced, "is asleep. We shall wake it by doing nothing it expects." He pointed at Milo. What do you think art should be?" The room fell silent. Milo felt dozens of eyes, mad, brilliant, broken, shining, staring at him. He wanted to say something clever, something wise, something Dada, but all he said was, "I think art should make people feel less alone." The room remained quiet. Then Duchamp nodded. Picabia placed a hand over his heart. A woman in the corner whispered, "That is the most dangerous idea of all." Before Milo could understand why, the lights went out. The cafe plunged into darkness. Voices murmured. Chairs scraped. Someone laughed, too quietly, too close. And then a glowing outline appeared on the wall. A symbol, a shape, something new, something no one had drawn, something that shouldn't exist but did. The crowd gasped. Picabia whispered, "It's happening again." Milo's skin prickled. He felt a familiar tug, the shifting of air that meant Dada was changing shape. Dada was evolving. Duchamp grabbed Milo's arm. "We're not alone anymore." The glowing symbol brightened. People backed away. Milo stepped closer. "What is it?" he asked. But the symbol pulsed once, twice, and then shattered into a storm of brilliant white fragments that flew through the cafe windows and scattered across the Paris night. When Milo looked back, Duchamp's expression was unreadable. Picabia whispered, "This changes everything." And then the cafe was silent after the symbol exploded into white fragments that vanished into the Paris night. Not silent in the normal way. Silent in the way a room becomes when everyone suddenly realizes they are not alone. Duchamp stepped cautiously toward the shattered window. Picabia, who never feared anything, took a step back. Milo's heart beat in a rhythm he didn't recognize. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something else entirely. A kind of ancient memory rising in his blood. "What was that?" Milo whispered. Duchamp didn't answer. Picabia didn't dare answer. Instead, the cafe lights flickered back on. For a moment, everything seemed normal until Milo noticed that each person's shadow no longer matched their body. Some shadows stretched upward instead of sideways. Others curled like smoke. One, belonging to a woman stirring her coffee, lifted its head and looked directly at Milo. Milo froze. Duchamp exhaled sharply. "No, not again." The woman's shadow detached from her feet with gentle peel, like a page torn from a book. It drifted toward Milo, weightless yet deliberate. "Don't move," Duchamp whispered. It senses attention. But Milo could not pay attention. The shadow stopped inches from him. Then it folded into a shape that wasn't human anymore. Something long, sinuous, and full of sharp corners. Something that flickered like a film reel with missing frames. Without warning, it spoke. Not in words. Not in sound. In ideas. "You took the question. Now we take the answer." Milo staggered back. I don't understand." Picabia grabbed a chair like a weapon, utterly useless, but comforting. Duchamp, this is your fault. You said the symbols were dormant. Duchamp glared. I said I hoped they were. The shadow twisted again, fluid, impossible, and pointed toward Milo's coat pocket, toward the postcard from Zurich, the one signed by Duchamp, the one that had guided him here. No, Duchamp whispered. It can't be reacting to that. Milo reached into his coat. His hand shook, but not from fear, from recognition, because the postcard was warm. He pulled it out. The ink on the message was glowing faintly, and the small sketch of the bicycle wheel was no longer still. It was spinning. The shadow recoiled, then screeched in a soundless burst of force that knocked over every glass in the room. Several people fled. Others fainted. Picabia shouted a string of insults at the shadow, most of which made no sense, but all of which were heartfelt. Duchamp stepped between Milo and the creature. Milo, he said quietly, listen to me. Shadows don't behave this way on their own. This isn't a ghost, not exactly. Then what is it? A fracture, Duchamp said. A tear in the logic of the world. And Dada, our ideas, our rebellions, our questions, have been poking at the tear for years. The shadow lunged. Milo held up the postcard instinctively. The shadow stopped in midair, as if hitting an invisible wall. Its shape wavered, its edges blurred, and then it whispered again inside Milo's mind. The question isn't yours to carry. Milo gathered the last of his courage. What question? The shadow filled the entire cafe, stretching toward the ceiling, crawling over the walls like ink and water. And then every object in the room began to rattle. Spoons danced. Glasses rang like bells. Paintings turned their faces to the floor. The shadow spoke one final time. The question that changes you. The question that changes US. The question that changes everything. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shadow collapsed into a thin ribbon of darkness that slipped beneath the door and vanished into the Paris night. Silence. True silence this time. Picabia lowered the chair. Well, that was new. Duchamp rubbed his temples. I was afraid our ideas might summon something. But this is far worse. Milo stared at the postcard glowing softly in his hand. What do I do now? He whispered. Duchamp looked at him with a mixture of pity and awe. You follow it, Duchamp said. Whatever it is, whatever is calling you. Picabia nodded. And will come with you, because apparently you made an enemy of the supernatural, and frankly that sounds fun. But before Milo could answer, the lights flickered once more. A new symbol burned briefly on the cafe wall, a spiral turning inside out. Then it vanished. Duchamp inhaled sharply. That is a surrealist symbol. But the surrealists haven't been born yet. Milo felt the tug again. Stronger this time. Urgent. Like the future itself was reaching for him. He closed his eyes. Where do we go now? He asked. Picabia grinned. Duchamp sighed. And the night answered for them. Paris didn't sleep that night. Not because of noise or war or drunken revelry, but because something unseen moved through the streets. Something that had no shape, until someone looked at it, and too many shapes when they didn't. Milo felt it first. A tug behind the ribs. A cold hand on the back of the neck. A whisper in a language older than fear. Duchamp, Picabia, and Milo walked down Rue Blomet, following the faint trace of the shadow creature. Occasionally, they passed a lamppost whose light stretched sideways, or a puddle that reflected a sky full of constellations Milo had never seen. What is happening to Paris? Milo whispered. It's not happening to Paris, Duchamp replied softly. It's happening through you. Picabia snorted. Lovely. The boys are conduit for a cosmic joke. But it wasn't a joke. They turned into a narrow street where the shadows twisted differently from the darkness. And there, in the middle of the cobblestones, was a crack in the air. Not a crack in the ground. A crack in empty space. Thin as a hair, glowing faintly blue, like a rip in the world's fabric. Milo felt sick. Duchamp stopped breathing for a moment. Picabia whispered, magnifique, which was the wrong reaction entirely. From the crack, a sound emerged. Not quite a whisper, not quite a hum. Something like thoughts being scraped together. Milo stepped closer. Milo, don't. Duchamp barked, grabbing his arm. Too late. The crack widened. A pulse of cold air burst out and rolled across the street, extinguishing every lamp. Buildings trembled. Windows fogged from the inside. Somewhere far away, a dog began barking at nothing, then whimpering at something. Picabia muttered, Oh, murder artistica. A shape pushed through the crack. Not the shadow from before. Something deeper. Something ancient. It looked like a figure made of black fire, shifting shapes faster than the eye could follow. Sometimes human, sometimes insect, sometimes pure geometry. Its face was a smooth oval of darkness with a single shimmering symbol in the center, the spiral they had seen in the cafe. Duchamp trembled. Picabia held his breath. Milo felt his bones vibrate. The creature spoke, not in thoughts, not in echoes. It spoke in dreams. Milo's vision blurred, and suddenly he was nowhere or everywhere. He saw a city floating upside down above the ocean. He saw clocks melting into rivers of starlight. He saw words growing like vines across a desert sky. He saw 1,000 eyes blinking inside a single tear. He saw the future of art. Flames, revolutions, manifestos, wars, laughter, madness. He fell to his knees, shaking. The entity's voice filled him. You are the key. You open the door. You will open the next. Milo whispered. I didn't open anything. The question did. The question? Milo gasped. But I don't even... The question that awakens U.S. The question that unmakes you. Duchamp stepped between Milo and the being, his hands trembling but steady. Leave him, Duchamp said. He's not your vessel. The entity tilted its head. Or what passed for a head? Artist. Unmaker. You tore reality before. You will tear it again. Picabia choked. Marcel, what did you do? Duchamp didn't look away. Nothing I regret. The entity extended a limb. No. A shadow? No. A piece of night shaped like a question mark. It touched Milo's chest. Milo screamed, not from pain, from revelation. Images flooded him. A room with no doors. A painting that breathed. A man with mirrored eyes. A woman with wings made of torn pages. A corridor shaped like a Mobius strip. A city where people walked into their own memories. Then, a hand, reaching for him. Human, familiar. A voice he knew but couldn't place whispered. Milo, don't follow them. He collapsed. The creature withdrew. The crack sealed itself with a soft snap, like a book closing. Silence. Picabia exhaled shakily. I think I prefer the angry shadow. Duchamp knelt beside Milo. Milo, look at me. Did it take anything? Did it leave anything? Milo opened his eyes slowly. I saw someone. Who? Duchamp asked. A person I've never met, Milo whispered, trembling. But who knew my name? Suddenly, Milo pulled the postcard from his coat. The bicycle wheel drawing had changed. Now it showed a door with the same spiral symbol as the creature. Duchamp's voice was barely audible. Oh, God, it's not done with you. Milo looked at the door drawn on the postcard and felt something on the back. He flipped it over. There were new words written in the same looping handwriting as before, but trembling jagged, as if written by someone fleeing. Don't open it. And below, even smaller. Not unless you're ready for what's on the other side. Milo stared at Duchamp. Duchamp stared back. Picabia whispered, Mon Dieu, we're not dealing with art anymore. Milo swallowed. What are we dealing with? Duchamp closed his eyes. A predator, he said softly. A paranormal intelligence that hunts meaning itself. And it wants you. Milo trembled. Far away. Thunder rolled across a clear sky. A sign, a warning, or a promise. Milo woke up before opening his eyes. He felt stone beneath him, cold, damp, ancient, but he had no memory of collapsing. He opened his eyes slowly. He was no longer in the street, no longer in Paris, no longer anywhere he recognized. A circular room stretched around him, walls carved with spirals, symbols, and shapes that flickered in and out of existence. Lines shifted when he looked directly at them, as though embarrassed to be caught. There was light, but no source of it. There was heat, but no fire. There was sound, faint whispers drifting through the walls like distant waves. Milo stood. His breath formed symbols instead of mist. A question mark, a spiral, a small broken circle. He stepped back in horror, but the symbols faded as quickly as they appeared. Where am I? As if answering, the symbols on the walls pulsed once, like a heartbeat. Then he heard a voice behind him. You need to stop being afraid of the wrong things. He spun around. A man stood there, middle-aged, tall, wearing a long coat that shimmered like ink in water. His face was half shadow, half light, like someone caught between two worlds. Milo recognized him instantly, though he had never seen him before. "You were the voice and the vision," Milo whispered. The man nodded. "Names matter little here, but you may call me the Archivist." "Where is this place?" Milo asked. The man gestured to the room. "This is not a place. It is a memory." "A memory of what?" "Of what the world tries to forget." The Archivist approached him. "When humans create something truly new," he said, "whether art or idea or dream, they tear a tiny hole in the veil between realities. Most tears close immediately, but every few centuries one stays open." Milo's spine froze. "The crack in Paris," he whispered. "Yes, and you, Milo, didn't create the tear, but you amplified it, because you carry something none of the others do." "What?" The Archivist smiled sadly. "A question powerful enough to reshape a universe." Milo shook his head. "I don't know any question like that." "You don't have to," the Archivist said. "It knows you." Before Milo could react, the room darkened. The walls began to pulse faster. Whispers thickened, blending into a single, trembling voice. "He has it. Take it. Open him." The Archivist stepped in front of Milo protectively. "They found us," he muttered. "Who?" Milo whispered. "Not who," the Archivist said. "What?" "The parasitic ideas. The predators born from uncontained imagination. The same entity you saw in Paris is only one of them." The shadows on the walls began to swell, dragging across the floor like spilled ink. Milo backed away. "Archivist, what do they want from me?" The Archivist turned sharply, grabbing Milo by the shoulders. "Listen to me. There's something inside you, not placed by them, but discovered by them. A seed, a spark, a question that can tear open the veil completely if spoken aloud. I don't know it. Not consciously," he said, "but unconsciously, you've been circling it your entire life. Your art, your doubt, your curiosity, they've brought you here." The shadows lunged. The walls cracked with light. Milo screamed, and suddenly he was back in Paris. He collapsed on the sidewalk outside the cafe, gasping, sweating, trembling. Duchamp and Picabia were kneeling over him. "Milo, Milo, look at me." Duchamp shook him gently. "Where were you?" "You disappeared. You literally vanished." "You were gone for an hour," Picabia said, "and also for seconds. I don't know. Time misbehaved." Milo grabbed Duchamp's sleeve. "I met someone," he gasped. "A man called the Archivist. He says this all started because of a question I don't know. He says creatures are hunting me. He says..." He stopped because behind Duchamp, painted across the cafe window, was a new symbol, one that hadn't been there before, one he recognized from the Archivist's chamber. A spiral, inside a circle, inside an eye. Picabia blinked. Who painted that? No one had a brush. No one had touched the window. And then Milo noticed something worse. The symbol wasn't on the glass. It was inside it, trapped between the layers like a fossil in amber. Duchamp stepped back. "This is escalating." Milo's breathing quickened. His vision blurred at the edges. Then he saw it, on the street across from them. A silhouette, tall, still, watching, but not a person. Its head was an empty frame, a picture frame filled with darkness. Picabia whispered, voice cracking, "Mais isso neo é possible." The frame-headed figure lifted a hand. Inside the empty frame where its face should be, a spiral began to turn. Slowly, patiently, hungrily, Milo staggered backward. Duchamp whispered, "It found you again." The spiral widened, and Milo heard a voice inside his skull. "Open the question, or we will open it for you." The world around him bent like melting glass. Lights shifted. Streets stretched. People froze mid-step. Reality itself had begun to warp. "Milo," Duchamp said sharply, grabbing his arm, "listen to me. You need to run." "Where?" Milo gasped. Picabia swallowed hard. "Lisbon, Zurich, Mars. Anywhere but here." But the figure with the frame face stepped off the curb and walked directly toward Milo. The spiral growing brighter, 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 and then the spiral inside the frame-headed creature widened until it filled his entire face. A whirlpool of impossible geometry pulling the air toward it. Milo felt his chest tighten, as if gravity had singled him out personally. "Milo, don't look at it," Duchamp shouted. Too late. The spiral twisted and the world bent. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. The street folded like paper. The cafe behind them stretched upward like melted wax. Cars elongated, compressing into thin vertical lines. People became silhouettes, their colors draining as though someone were erasing them with a trembling hand. Picabia grabbed Milo's arm. "Run." They sprinted, but the street didn't stay still long enough to run on. It rippled, curved, flipped upside down without warning. Milo stumbled into a stairway that hadn't existed a moment before, climbed it, and found himself on a bridge that should have been 2 neighborhoods away. Paris was rewriting itself. Duchamp shouted behind him, "It's using the question. It's feeding off your potential." "I don't know the question." Milo cried. "That's why it's chasing you." Picabia roared. Behind them, the creature walked without hurry. Each step it took restructured the world. Windows dissolved into clouds. Street lamps bent like soft clay. A stray cat split into 3 versions of itself, each running in a different direction. A church belfry inverted, pointing down like a stalactite. The creature lifted its hand. The spiral grew brighter. A wave of distortion spread outward like a shock wave, not forceful, but rearranging. Milo felt it brush him, and suddenly he was standing in the Cabaret Voltaire. Zurich. Candles flickered. Artists argued. Hugo Ball stood on stage wearing his magical cardboard costume. "Milo." Hugo blinked. "Why are you—" A second wave hit. Everything dissolved. Milo was at the Berlin studio. Newspapers. Glue. A beating drum. Hulsenbeck turning toward him in confusion. Another wave. Gone. Now a desert. A clock melting on a sand dune. A sky full of eyes. A train floating above the horizon. "Milo." Duchamp's voice cut through every layer of distortion. A hand grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back into Paris. Reality snapped violently around him, like a rubber band pulled too far. Milo fell to his knees, shaking. Blood trickled from his nose. Picabia stared at him in horror. You slipped between worlds. Duchamp inhaled sharply. No, he didn't slip. He was pulled. The creature is trying to destabilize him, to break down the boundaries inside his mind until the question surfaces. Milo looked up, terrified. If I remember the question, will it leave me alone? Duchamp shook his head. No, that's when things get truly dangerous. The frame-headed creature appeared at the end of the distorted street, silent and patient, like a predator certain its prey had nowhere left to run. It raised its hand again. This time, the spiral didn't expand outward. It expanded inward, into Milo's mind. A pressure filled him, thick and cold. Memories rearranged themselves. He saw events from his own life bend into impossible shapes. Moments he didn't remember. Moments that hadn't happened. Moments that should have happened. Then, a memory that wasn't a memory. A voice he'd heard only once. You need to stop being afraid of the wrong things. The Archivist. Suddenly, Milo was back in the circular chamber. The Archivist stood before him, but flickering, as if being viewed through water. Milo listened quickly. He said, "The creature hunting you is not alone, and it is not the worst thing behind the terror." Milo struggled to breathe. "I can't hold this. I'm being pulled apart." The Archivist pressed a hand to his chest. Everything froze. "Milo," he said calmly, urgently, "the question inside you is not a sentence. It is a doorway. And if you open it now in fear, the creature will control what comes through. I don't know it." Milo cried. "But you will," the Archivist said. "And when you do, you must make a choice." Milo felt the world cracking again, the creature dragging him back. "What choice?" he begged. The Archivist's voice became distant, stretched across collapsing realities. Whether to save the world or rewrite it. The chamber shattered. Milo gasped and collapsed back into Paris. Duchamp and Picabia steadied him. The frame-headed creature now stood only 5 steps away. The spiral inside its face turned white-hot. "Milo," Duchamp whispered, "if it reaches you, your mind will tear open like paper. Then what do I do?" Milo sobbed. The creature extended its hand, and the spiral launched toward Milo like a beam of pure distortion. Duchamp shoved Milo aside. The beam grazed Duchamp's arm, and his arm turned into a stack of drawings. Loose pages fluttered to the ground, each containing a different fragment of him. An eye, a hand, a smirk, a thought. Picabia screamed. "Marcel!" The creature tilted its frame head as if curious. Duchamp's remaining arm grabbed Milo's sleeve. His voice cracked. "Run. Now!" Milo ran. The creature followed. Reality collapsed behind them, and somewhere, faintly and possibly, a door creaked open. Milo ran. He wasn't running through streets anymore. Paris had stopped being streets. He was running through corridors that flickered in and out of existence, staircases that descended upward Bridges connected to places that had never been built. Reality had begun to melt, swirl, and fold like softened wax. Behind him came the sound of the framed creature's footsteps. Slow, steady, horrifyingly patient. Each step rearranged the world, bending it closer to its own impossible logic. Duchamp, half dissolved into fluttering pages, scattered across the distorted wind. Picabia screamed after him until his voice broke. Milo didn't dare look back. A crackle of electricity split the air, the creature drawing closer, the spiral in its face rotating faster and faster. Milo turned a corner, and the ground simply wasn't there anymore. He fell. He fell far longer than any fall should last. And when he finally slammed onto solid ground, he rose slowly into a place that could not exist. The city of unplaces. Around him stretched a landscape of unfinished buildings, stairways that ended abruptly, bridges dangling over nothing, doors painted onto walls with no hinges. Every structure looked like an abandoned idea, as if architecture itself had lost the confidence to become real. The sky wasn't a sky. It was a vast gray canopy with shadows sliding beneath its surface, like creatures trapped between dimensions. Milo staggered forward, and then he saw it. A door, standing alone, not set into a wall, not connected to anything. Just a solitary black wooden door, upright on the ground. On its surface, carved in the faintest possible lines, was a spiral symbol. Milo's blood froze. The same spiral from Paris, from the shadow creature, from the Archivist's chamber. He saw movement reflected in the door's varnish. The frame creature had entered the city of unplaces. It moved in absolute silence, approaching him with a terrible certainty of gravity itself. Milo backed away from the black door, but then the door began to breathe. Slow, deep inhalations, the wood swelling, shrinking, the spiral pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. And then it spoke. Not out loud, inside him, inside the marrow of his bones. Do not open me until you know the question. Milo shook his head violently. I don't know it. I don't even know what it is. The door exhaled. Dust rippled across the ground. You have always known it. You have always carried it. You have always run from it. Milo pressed his hands to his skull. Stop. Please stop. Behind him, the creature stepped closer. The world shivered. The door's voice grew louder. When you speak the question, the world will split. One side will live. One side will wake. One side will end. Milo fell to his knees. What question? The creature halted a few meters away. The spiral inside its empty frame face glowed white-hot. And then, from somewhere deep in the sky, a low metallic moan echoed through the city of unplaces. The door shuddered. The creature responded. The spiral expanded. The ground cracked beneath Milo's feet. And suddenly, a memory that wasn't his tore through him. A hand touching a canvas that wasn't painted yet. A child whispering a question to a star. A museum collapsing inward into a single point of light. A room with no ceiling, where ideas floated like jellyfish. A voice, calm, ancient, familiar, murmuring. Every universe begins with question. Yours has not been asked yet. Milo gasped and clutched the dirt. His heart thundered. He felt the question rising inside him, closer, sharper, almost forming. Duchamp's disembodied voice whispered from the scattered pages. Milo, don't ask it. Not yet. The creature lifted a hand. The spiral widened. Everything rushed toward Milo. The door, the creature, the sky, the question, and then a new crack split open above him, bright and violent as lightning. A hand reached out. Human, alive, desperate. A woman's voice shouted, Milo, grab my hand now. He did. Reality shattered. Milo felt himself being pulled upward through a crack in reality. No, not upward. Sideways? Insideward? The direction didn't exist in any geometry he knew. The city of unplaces shattered below him like broken glass sliding off a table. The frame creature lunged, the spiral stretching outward like a mouth. But the hand pulling Milo was faster. A violent flash swallowed everything, and suddenly he was on a rooftop. Wind whipped his hair. The smell of rain clung to the night. He could hear the distant honk of horns, the murmur of life. The world still trying to behave normally. He was back in Paris. Not the distorted nightmare version. The real one. Or at least a version close enough to it. Milo coughed and pushed himself upright. Standing before him was the woman who'd saved him. Tall, sharp eyes, clothes torn as though she had run through a storm that didn't exist in this world. She looked familiar in a way that made Milo's stomach twist. Not because he knew her, but because she knew him. You're alive, she breathed, relief flooding her face. Thank God. I wasn't sure I'd reach you in time. Who are you? Milo whispered. She hesitated. My name is Mara. The wind picked up as if reacting to the name. Milo stared at her. I've heard that name somewhere. You have, Mara said, but not yet, and not here. Milo blinked. What is that even? Before he could finish, Mara held up a hand. Listen carefully, Milo. We don't have long. The creature will find you again soon. They always do. They? Milo repeated. Mara nodded. There are many of them. The frame creature was only a hunter. There are archivists, feeders, mimics, and worse. Worse. Milo asked. Mara's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer. Milo, you asked how I knew your name. Yes. She exhaled slowly. Because I've met you before. He stumbled back. No. Impossible. I've never. Not this you, she said softly. A different you. One that lived in another version of this world. The rooftop seemed to darken around them. Milo felt a cold shiver climb his spine. You're saying I exist in other worlds? Mara nodded. Yes. And in one of them you knew me? I did, she said, her voice tight with emotion. You and I traveled together through the fractures. We tried to close them. We tried to stop the question from waking. We almost succeeded. Milo's breath caught. What happened to the other me? Mara looked away. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Mara, Milo repeated, voice trembling. What happened to him? She finally spoke. He asked a question. Milo froze. And when he did, Mara continued, the world folded. He folded with it. He wasn't killed. He wasn't destroyed. He was rewritten. But why? Milo whispered. Why does this question do that? Mar met his eyes. Because the question doesn't reveal an answer. It reveals a choice. And most minds can't survive knowing it. The wind rushed harder now, as if fleeing. Milo's hands trembled. What is the question? He begged. Why is it inside me? Why do they want it? Mara stepped forward and placed her hands on his shoulders. Because the question is the original fracture, she said. The first break in the veil between worlds. The first spark of creation. The first act of imagination ever committed by anything that existed. The question didn't just start Dada, Milo. It started reality. Milo staggered back as if struck. Mara continued. You are a carrier, a rare type of consciousness able to hold a paradox without collapsing. They can't access the question themselves, so they're hunting the minds capable of remembering it. And if they get me, Mara swallowed. Then the tear doesn't grow larger. It becomes permanent. Milo felt dizzy. But why me? Why not Duchamp? Or Zara? Or... Mara shook her head. No artist can carry both pure creation and pure inquiry at once. Their minds collapse too early into style, identity, direction. But you listen. You absorb. You wander. Your consciousness is flexible, unanchored. She stepped even closer. And that makes you dangerous. To them. To the world. To me? Milo felt a chill. To you? Mara hesitated, then said, in the other world. You were the only one who could hear the question without losing yourself. She touched the side of his face. I loved you for that. Milo's breath caught. Wind howled across the rooftop. Before he could speak, a violent pulse shook the air. Milo and Mara turned. The sky above Paris twisted. The stars rearranged into a spiral. A tear opened, a new one, fresh and hungry. And from inside the tear, the frame creature stepped out, fully formed, restored, more powerful than before. Mara grabbed Milo's hand. Run. The creature raised its arm. The spiral ignited like a white sun. Mara, Milo shouted over the roar. You said you almost stopped the question before. How? We sealed the tear, she replied. But to do it again. Another shockwave. Buildings warped. Clouds turned upside down. The Eiffel Tower flickered like a candle. Mara, how do we close it? Mara looked at him, face pale with fear. You're not going to like the answer. Tell me. To close the tear, she squeezed his hand. You must open the question first. And then the rooftop shook. The spiral in the creature's frame face blazed so brightly it washed the color out of the world. Paris trembled beneath it, chimneys bending, shadows stretching, windows turning into black mirrors. Mara pulled Milo behind a crumbling stone vent as another wave of distortion ripped across the skyline. Milo, listen to me. You must open the question. I don't know it. Yes, you do, she said, gripping his face in both hands. It's been inside you since before Zurich, before the cabaret, before you were born in this world. Some part of you brought it across the fractures. He shook his head violently. No, if I speak it, the Archivist said the world will split. Mara nodded. Her eyes were wet. It will, but not speaking will end it. Another blast struck the building. The ledge cracked. A section of the roof collapsed into the apartments below. The frame creature advanced, stepping through debris as if walking through fog. Its voice, thousands of whispers layered together, filled Milo's skull. Open. The question. Milo stumbled back. His heart raced. Mara, I'm terrified. I know, she whispered, but you're the only person across every version of this world who ever managed to hold a question without breaking. How do you know that? Milo asked. Her voice cracked. Because I watched the others fail. Lightning tore the sky open. The tear widened behind the creature, revealing a swirling vortex of impossible architecture and shifting memories. The place where reality was born and where it would die. Mara pulled Milo to his feet. You have one chance. If you open the question from fear, the creature controls the answer and everything ends. If you open it from clarity, the choice becomes yours. What choice? The same one every reality faces eventually, Mara said. She leaned in and whispered, whether to continue or to change. The creature loomed over them. The spiral expanded. The tear behind it grew into a colossal wound in the sky. Everything vibrated. Milo felt something rising inside him. A memory, a sensation, a word he had never spoken but always known. The question. It assembled itself in his mind like a constellation forming from scattered stars. Mara stepped back. Milo, say it. The frame creature froze, sensing it. Paris held its breath. The tear glowed white like the mouth of creation. Milo closed his eyes. The question pulsed once in his mind, then became clear. He opened his mouth and spoke. What if the world could choose again? Silence. The spiral inside the creature's face shattered like glass. The tear in the sky inverted, folding it on itself like a collapsing star. Mara gasped, You did it! But the world around them had already started to reshape. Every building, every stone, every lamp post turned translucent, as if awaiting instructions. The city flickered between thousands of possibilities. Paris rebuilt, destroyed, neon, ancient, underwater, floating, empty, infinite. Milo was no longer standing on a rooftop. He was suspended in a void of choices. Mara floated beside him, her outline shimmering. Milo, this is the crossroads, she said softly. The question has opened the rewriting. All realities are waiting. You must choose. I don't understand. You don't need to, she said. You only need to feel. Below him, 3 visions formed. 1, the world stays as it is. Flawed, fragile, chaotic, beautiful. A world where meaning is argued over but never settled. A world of pain and possibility. 2, the world awakens. A place where imagination and reality merge. Where dreams bleed into the streets. Where art becomes physics and consciousness shapes matter. A world of wonder but unstable. 3, the world ends. Quietly, gently, like a play whose actors take their final bow. No suffering, no struggle, just closure. Mara's voice reached him softly. I've seen worlds where people chose to change, and worlds where they chose to end. There is no right answer, only the one that fits your heart. Milo looked down. The creature was gone. The city was still flickering between shapes. The tear was closed, waiting. Milo asked, trembling, what did the other version of me choose? Mara smiled sadly. He chose to awaken the world. And what happened? It survived, she said. But he didn't. Milo swallowed hard. And you? What do you want to choose? Mara stepped forward, placed her forehead gently against his. I want you to choose the world where you live. He closed his eyes. Light swirled. Reality bent. The 3 visions waited. Milo lifted his hand and chose. He chose the first world. The flawed one. The fragile one. The real one. Asterisk, asterisk. Because he realized a world with uncertainty is a world with freedom. A world without perfection is a world with hope. A world with limits is a world where art can rebel. The void collapsed into light. The choice locked. And Milo woke on a quiet Paris morning. The sky normal. The rooftops intact. The city breathing softly. No spirals. No creatures. No tears in reality. His heart slowed. Mara, he whispered, but she was gone. Only a faint imprint of her hand remained on his sleeve, warm for a moment, then fading. Footsteps echoed behind him. Milo turned. Duchamp, whole human confused, was staring at him. Are you all right? Duchamp asked. Milo smiled weakly. I think so. And the world? Duchamp asked. Milo looked out at the sunrise over Paris. It chose to stay itself. Duchamp sighed with relief. Good. I always liked this version. Milo laughed softly. For the first time since Zurich, he felt safe inside his own mind. Dada would continue. Paris would continue. Art would continue. And the question would sleep again. For now.